So, welcome to my presentation on the Frankencoin. So this is a PhD project, or started as a PhD project, but I also want to push this into real life to make it a network, to make it live on the Ethereum network, and to create a Oracle-free, collateralized, decentralized Swiss franc stablecoin. So I think there's quite a few things in there that make this unique project with a real chance of becoming something that is relevant. So first, I have these three points. I have a vision. I talk a little about the properties of the Frankencoin, and then I describe how it works. So the vision is nothing smaller than to democratize the creation of money. So today, money creation is done through the central bank with the help of the commercial banks. And the commercial bank, they multiply the money supply through their credit system. And the problem is this is a very centralized system. And at the same time, it's something very important. So whoever controls the allocation of money also controls the allocation of resources in the real economy. And this is not only through the interest rates, it's also through the capital requirements. For example, if capital requirements for government bonds are very low, banks can leverage a lot on government bonds and not invest or create money as much for startups or for other projects. And this has a real consequence. So what we observe in practice is that the regulation, the capital requirements, they push banks towards creating money for real estate and government bonds and to neglect small businesses or startups or more risky projects, even though they would be more beneficial to the economy overall if they receive the money. And this can change if we decentralize the creation of money, if anyone can create money. And this should unlock a lot of value if the economist and economic theory is right. So the question is, can we create a decentralized, fully backed stablecoin that does not depend on oracles and is open to any collateral? So these are the two requirements that so far have not been fulfilled very well. We will see a comparison later, and these are the main challenges I aim to tackle with the Frankencoin. So, by the way, it doesn't have to be Swiss franc, so this is just the first version. There could also be a copy of it with dollars or euros and so on. But here in Switzerland, we should have a strong Swiss franc on the blockchain, so that's why I started with that. So, what stablecoins are out there? So there's we've seen different types before, and I think it's a great time to start a new stablecoin because the centralized ones, they are kind of boring. They don't solve this economic problem. They are helpful, but they are not where we want to go in the end. Then there's a few decentralized ones, most notably DAI, which is a very interesting project. I think it's one of the greatest DeFi projects out there. One problem there is centralization, so it's de facto governed by a relatively small number of people. And it's also actually not that decentralized because most of its reserves are in USDC. And my favorite project on this list is besides Frankencoin, is LUSD, which did many things very well. Their main weakness, which is shared with DAI, is their dependency on the Chainlink Oracle, which can be manipulated anytime by the admins of Chainlink. So this is not that decentralized, actually, and I wanted to get rid of that dependency. Also, liquidity is limited to Ether as a collateral, which causes everyone who mints liquid US dollars to suffer from the opportunity cost of not being able to stake these Ether. So I hope to create something more flexible. And there's one deployed version out there, but it won't be the last. So at the moment, there's a code competition running on Code Arena. I think there's 3 days left, where if you find bugs, you can get a nice bug bounty. So, yes, I mentioned these properties. It should be oracle-free, collateralized. I don't believe in algorithmic stablecoins. They often have a weakness that they collapse eventually if people lose trust, like it happened with Ironcoin and Terra and so on. And I also think it should be completely decentralized so that it's truly democratic and it cannot be manipulated by a centralized entity. If we go a little deeper into the system, you will see that there's actually two tokens. So one is the stablecoin itself, and like many other projects, there's also a governance token, or a token that represents part. So this is like the share of, if this was a bank, if the whole Frankencoin system was a bank, one would be the deposit token, which is stable, and the other one would be the shares or the equity capital of the bank. And similar to the shares of a bank, you can also speculate with that. If you believe in a system, you can buy the pool shares. You will suffer if there are losses, and you will make profits if there are gains. So how does that work? So what I did as part of my research, I have one paper that is called the Continuous Capital Corporation, where I looked into AMMs for automatically issue and redeem capital of a company. And I found some solution that is optimal under a wide range of circumstances that can lead to the optimal capital allocation. And this is based in the end, so that I won't go deep into mathematics, but in the end what you get here for this system is a function where you say the market cap is proportional to the reserve. The reserve is the equity capital in this case. And the price and supply, of course, when you multiply them, they must lead to the market cap. And the price climbs with the squared cubic root of the reserve. And supply goes up with the cubic root of the reserve. So if reserves go up by a factor of 1,000, then supply goes up by a factor of 10, and the price goes up by a factor of 100. And this allows for a dynamic issuance and redemption of these pool shares. And if you put in money, your money is a little at risk because it's used to cover losses, like a bank's balance sheet. And if you sell them, you can take money out, and the profits and the losses also accumulate in that pool. So this is very similar to shares. Also, you get some voting rights with these shares. So if we dig a little deeper, we can look at it like a bank. So we can say the whole Frankencoin system has assets and liabilities. So, and on the liability side, there's all the Frankencoins in circulation, because everyone who owns a Frankencoin basically has a claim towards the system saying, I want to have 1 Swiss franc back at some point in time. Also, there's some reserves and equity capital. So there's a mint reserve, which I will mention later in more detail, which is kind of debt or Fremdkapital. So, and there's equity capital, which is the value of the system if you would liquidate it. On the asset side, you have so some people who provide collateral and mint tokens, they have to return these tokens. And the number of tokens they have minted and need to return, that's in this example 80 million. That's what they owe the system, basically. Then there might be some, we have a stablecoin bridge, there might be some other stablecoins locked in that bridge for conversion. And then there's the reserve that is used to absorb losses. And so this is more or less the balance sheet. And if the system makes profits, equity goes up. If the system makes losses, equity goes down, and the pool shareholders are poorer. So if you look at it more technically, there's a number of smart contracts. So each of these boxes is one of the most essential smart contracts in the system. There's 2 ERC20 tokens. So the Frankencoin and the pool shares. And the Frankencoin is actually very modular. So anyone can propose a new mint plugin. So this is to make it future-proof. Maybe you have a different idea than I did so far. So I so far had 2 ideas for minting plugins. One is the stablecoin bridge, where you can supply 1 crypto franc and mint the Frankencoin. The crypto franc is the Swiss franc stablecoin from Bitcoin Swiss. So we trust that stablecoin up to a certain limit, and anyone who provides a crypto franc can get a Frankencoin, and vice versa, as long as there are crypto francs left in the bridge. So this is a very simple AMM that's fixed to a one-to-one conversion. Then there's the collateralized minting hub, which contains all the logic for the collateralized minting with this novel auction oracle-free liquidation mechanism. But if you have a different idea on how Frankencoins should be minted, you are free to propose, to suggest a new minter, a new smart contract that then has the power to mint and burn Frankencoins arbitrarily. Of course, if you do that in a way that is not beneficial for the system, then hopefully the shareholders step in and veto your proposal. And that's part of the governance, so it's not a vote, it's just a veto. Anyone who has 3% of the voting power can veto any proposal. So, and the veto power comes from holding pool shares. And the same veto power you can also use to veto new types of collateral. So the minting hub also recognizes the veto power of the pool shareholders. And if someone creates a new position with a completely new collateral, that can be vetoed by the pool shareholders. But once it's approved and you can start minting. So how does that work? Let's make an example. So let's say, and here a lot of brain cycles went into it, making this really attack-proof. This is also a core part of my Frankencoin paper, where I look at it from a game theoretic perspective with decision trees, and I show it payoff matrices and so on, to show that this is really solid. Because there's a few problems with liquidations in the existing protocols. The first problem is they often depend on Oracle. And even if you get rid of the Oracle and say, we look at an exchange, there is the problem of price manipulation. And even if you do an auction, like in the DAI system, there's sometimes an auction under certain circumstances, there's a risk of price manipulation, that someone who does not want to get liquidated bids a too high price or things like that. So you need to design the system carefully in a way that is not attackable by someone who wants to manipulate it. And the solution I've come up with here is that we don't depend on anything external, we just use this auction mechanism. So for example, Alice opens a position and says, I want to have wrapped Ether as a collateral. I claim that these wrapped Ether are worth 1,500 Swiss francs each. And when you propose a position, you also need to propose a reasonable reserve ratio. This is like the haircut when you do collateralized lending. Yes, when you do collateralized minting. So in this case, maybe 20%. This means that when she gets liquidated and the market price is only 10% below what she said is the liquidation price, then we are still good. This is kind of a reserve buffer to absorb price shocks. And so when she does that, when she opens a position, she pays a minting fee or a proposal fee to make sure the system doesn't get spammed. Then if no one vetoes her position, she is free to use it for as long as the position is valid. This is also a parameter, can be 2 years, can be 1 year, whatever makes sense for Alice. So she mints 150,000 crypto Frankencoins, and out of that she receives 120,000, and 30,000 is automatically put aside into the so-called minter's reserve. This is used if there's a liquidation below the liquidation price. So now prices start to fall, and Bob says this is not worth, this collateral is not worth 1,500 Swiss francs per Ether anymore, so I challenge that. So and this is one of the key factors. When he starts a challenge, he has also put some collateral at risk and say, here's 100 wrapped Ether of my own. And now the auction, depending on who wins it or how high the price gets, the auction is about getting Alice's or Bob's wrapped Ether or collateral. So in one case, if the market price is still above 1,500 Swiss francs per Ether, the bidder gets Bob's wrapped Ether, and Bob gets the bidder's bid, and Alice is unaffected. So that means that as long as the market price is higher than 1,500, all is fine for Alice, and Bob gets to sell his wrapped Ether maybe below market, but maybe market price is even 1,600, 700, then Bob has made a loss and sold his wrapped Ether below the market price. So this is the case where the challenge is averted. But there's also a case where the challenge is successful. For example, the highest bid is only 130,000 crypto Frankencoin. In that case, the challenge is considered successful because the challenge has shown that the market price is below the liquidation price. And in this case, the challenger gets his 100 wrapped Ether back and a reward of 2% of the whole capital at risk, which is 3,000 Frankencoin. The bidder gets to buy 100 wrapped Ether from Alice, and his bid goes to the reserve. Also, Alice's minter reserve of 30,000 is allocated to reserve. So this is potentially a lot to gain for the equity holders. But we need to cover the loss from that as well. So basically there's a loss of 120,000, which we don't get back. So this gives a profit and for the system of, let me see if this is correct. Yes, should be 27. Yes. So there was a debt. There was a debt of 150,000. But I think you're right. Could be 27 because we got 30,000 back, and 130,000 is 160 together, and 3,000 goes to the challenger. Then it's 27,000 profits left. You're right. So yes, and Alice gets to keep whatever Frankencoins she has minted. And so this is the basic system. And there's a lot of small, subtle difficulties that could happen. For example, what happens if Alice makes a very high bid to fool the system? Then she just overpays. And it's very expensive. And the system is structured that even if she overpays to end the challenge, she cannot immediately withdraw everything and close the position. There's an opportunity first for the challenger to repeat it. So it can be repeated. And Alice will suffer infinite losses over time if she manipulates the system. So, and there's also other things that are thought of. For example, you can make a much smaller challenge. You can only challenge 10% of the whole position, then everything is scaled down. This is to make sure that you even can challenge the system if you don't have 100 wrapped Ether. There can be multiple challenges in parallel and so on. So I hope that every conceivable use case is actually covered. If you look at this of course, from a risk perspective, then there's this challenge period. So this challenge can run from between whatever is specified in this position, between 1 day or 10 days. So, and if in this period the price drops too low, then of course we have a risk that we have to cover a loss. Also, there's cases, especially if you use an exotic collateral, if you use the shares of a chocolate factory, for example, the tokenized shares of a chocolate factory, and the factory burns down, then the value of the shares, they go from 100 to 0. And then you have no chance at liquidating at a good price. And in these cases, the system covers a loss, and then you need to have some overview over all the positions and see how the risk balances out. And this is basically what the bank does. So the bank needs to know that what its risks are and how they are balanced, and how the different risks are correlated. And this will be one of the harder and more difficult part in the long run for the governance to get right, to make sure that the risks are in balance and there's no bank run with a bankruptcy like we've seen in the real world. The main difference to the real world, of course, is that we have full transparency here. So no one exactly knows, even today, what is on the balance sheet of Credit Suisse. But here with the Frankencoin system, at any given point in time, we have full transparency and know all the collateral, we know all the assets, all the liabilities, and this would create a lot of trust, I would hope, and it would also allow an attacker to step in time and to challenge all the positions if the attacker notices that the value drops below. So we have built a front end for that. So this is on frankencoin.com. There's 2 screenshots. If you would like to join this project, let me know. Especially welcome would be someone to cover the front end and take ownership of that. But overall, I think this would be a very interesting opportunity. So we are a distributed team. I do a little bit. There's a few others, but there's no formal company or so behind. The idea is that the incentives in the end will make sure that the system works. And that's it. So if you have questions, let me know.
Thank you very much for the talk. So we have a bit of time for questions. Maybe there is one. Oh sorry, you can start.
Well, thank you for the presentation. Fascinating project. I really liked it. It seems like you're aiming at fixing MakerDAO. So it seems like MakerDAO was one of the major inspirations behind your project. And what you call a stablecoin bridge is very similar to the PSM in MakerDAO. And the PSM, like during the USDC scare that you have shown, it also proved to be a major weakness of the MakerDAO because it also made the price of DAI to collapse together with USDC, even though less than half of their reserves were in USDC. Because of the PSM, the price went all the way to USDC's price. And it seems like you have introduced the same vulnerability. Like, why do you need the stablecoin bridge? So that's my first question. Couldn't it work without the stablecoin bridge? And the second question that I have is with the particular choice of the stablecoin, the crypto franc, which is prepared for the situation, which is not the case now, but was the case like 2 years ago, that the interest rate on the franc was negative. And because of that, if you put Swiss franc in a bank, you're actually earning a negative interest rate, and the crypto franc also did the same. And if you're using, if that were the case again, then what you could do is you could take your crypto franc, which is depreciating effectively because your balance is decreasing, and get the Frankencoin, which doesn't have that problem, and kind of shift the loss onto somebody else. So these are my 2 questions. Like, how are you dealing with this problem?
So the first question, the answer is, why are we doing this? Because it's very convenient. It allows users to get in and out easily. And of course, there's a risk. So there's also a limit with each stablecoin bridge. You specify what is the limit, up to how much can you deposit there. But of course, it's a risk. Then the other question regarding the crypto franc. So I built this system under the assumption that interest rates won't turn negative again. So it works well with positive rates, but under negative rates, everything is very strange and complicated. So I just said, I assume that this doesn't happen.
Great. So I think we have for one short question, and then after that we will set up the follow-up or the following panel.
Yeah, short question. So about the example you presented, the second point was assuming no one is vetoing. So I wanted to ask a little bit more in detail how the veto works. Is again with the 3% of the votes or the voting power, or is there also some negative incentive not to veto in a bad way, like for instance to censor some specific positions? And you can imagine that someone wants to uses collateral some specific token, and then you can identify and you say, I don't want this position, I will just veto it. So is there some fee to veto? Is it easy to veto? How does it work?
So if I understand correctly, the question is, can positions be abused to create Frankencoin with any collateral as an attack? Or?
No, I mean, the second point was, in the algorithm, let's say, it was said, no one is vetoing. So I just want to know more details on who is this no one that can veto. And
anyone can veto. So yes, so if you propose a new position, people who own 3% of the pool share votes, they can veto that position. And here, it's actually not just 3% of the balance of all pool shares, it's a time-weighted voting. So if you have held 10 shares for 10 days, you have the same voting power as someone else who held 5 shares for 20 days. This is to make sure that someone with a flash clone cannot manipulate the system. Okay. And then there's another, but this is one of the spots where it's still under construction because this governance is very hard. I want to have so there's a few very important elements. One is I don't want to have votes. I don't want to have explicit governance because that also creates responsibility. I want a veto-based governance because then, and this is a legal consideration, if you do nothing, no one can accuse you of having done something. Like in the legal system, if you actively kill someone, that is punished much harder than if you are just a bystander and watch someone drowning, right? So that it's kind of legal protection to say no one did anything, and it's only if you step in and veto and prevent something from happening, then also you're not liable for the whole system. So this is one consideration. And also, and this is even more important, I would say, it's much more usable if the system is designed in a way that if everyone behaves well, then you don't need to organize votes and step in and do anything. You can just sit there and watch it happen. So the system is designed that you only need to step in and veto when something bad happens, and if the threat of vetoing is credible enough, then no one will do anything bad.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. So again, a round of applause to Luzius. And you will stay with us because we have now a panel on the Swiss blockchain community and ecosystem. We will shortly set the stage up.